Have you ever noticed how some individuals move through life with an unshakable sense of purpose and quiet strength, while others seem to wander, endlessly waiting for a breakthrough or transformation? The contrast isn't a matter of fortune or random destiny. It's rooted in a deeper, more profound truth, a spiritual principle hidden in plain sight. This principle is your imagination, but not the imagination of fairy tales or fictional daydreams. This is not about escapism. We're speaking of the creative faculty of consciousness, the sacred force within you that shapes the outer world through inner conviction and vision. It's not fantasy. It is a spiritual technology, subtle, yet profoundly powerful. This type of imagination doesn't seek validation. It doesn't wait for logical approval or external permission. It moves as a quiet current within you, generating reality from the inside out. And once you awaken to that realization, your relationship with life begins to shift. The distance between who you believe you are and who you long to become no longer feels like a chasm. It becomes an entryway. That doorway does not open outward. It opens inward. Mainstream culture has conditioned you to look outside yourself for power in achievement, recognition, material wealth, or social status. But authentic power is none of those things. It has always resided within you, not metaphorically, but literally. It is encoded into the very fabric of your consciousness. Your imagination is not a passive function of the mind. It is a spiritual faculty, the active presence of divine intelligence expressing itself through you. When you ignore this inner faculty, life feels chaotic and direction seems elusive. But when you engage with it intentionally, you become a conscious co-creator of your experience. You no longer drift aimlessly. You begin to navigate with clarity and purpose. You are not here to plead with a distant deity for favors. You are not meant to bow endlessly before an external source of power. You are here to awaken to the truth of what you are, an emanation of that divine force, endowed with the ability to imagine, shape, and bring forth a higher reality. Ask most people to describe God, and they will instinctively gesture upward or outward. Some will point to a religious book, a statue, the sky, or a supernatural figure far removed from daily life. This is no coincidence. Humanity has long projected its sense of divine power onto something external, a distant overseer, a celestial authority, a hidden force beyond the stars. Yet, in truth, the real nature of God has no image and no physical form. It is not a bearded figure in the clouds or a presence locked inside stone temples. The real God is closer than we've been taught, closer than breath, embedded in our awareness, moving quietly through our thoughts and feelings. It doesn't shout, it whispers, it doesn't hide. It flows through the very consciousness you experience in each moment. And that divine force, that active power of creation, is your imagination. At first, this may seem radical or even simplistic. How could something so internal, so ordinary be considered divine? But that's precisely the point. Spiritual truth is rarely cloaked in mystery or ritual. The sacred is not distant. It is embedded in our very being. Your imagination is not a figment or fantasy. It is the mechanism by which reality takes shape. It doesn't create with lightning or dramatic gestures. It manifests quietly and consistently. Your imagination doesn't moralize. It doesn't weigh your thoughts as good or bad. It simply amplifies and externalizes what you habitually think, feel, and believe. It responds to your inner dialogue, to your assumptions and mental images, and reflects those back into your lived experience. It is the invisible engine behind all reality, constantly working whether you are aware of it or not. And that engine is divine. When ancient scriptures declare, "I am the Lord, and there is no other," they are not referring to a being outside of you. They are guiding your attention inward. When it says, "Be still and know that I am God," it is not a command to worship something external, but a call to silence the distractions of the world and to discover the creative intelligence within your own awareness. That divine presence doesn't live in sanctuaries built by human hands. It resides in the stillness of your consciousness, in the visions you hold and the feelings you nurture. Your imagination isn't just a place to escape. It is the true sanctuary, the inner holy of holies, where the divine meets your human experience. Ignore this, and life becomes repetitive and confusing, like walking in circles. Embrace it, and you begin to walk with light and purpose. Your imagination will faithfully produce whatever inner reality you accept as true, whether helpful or harmful. That's both its power and its impartiality. It requires no rituals of devotion. What it requires is recognition. If you believe yourself unworthy, your imagination will construct a life that reflects that belief. If you feel whole and empowered, your reality will mirror that wholeness. It does not act based on what you wish were true. It acts on what you consistently accept as true about yourself and the world. This is what makes imagination sacred. It cannot be deceived. It reflects not your fleeting hopes, but your persistent self-concept. It is a spiritual mirror, and it produces accordingly. So stop waiting for signs in the sky. Stop expecting some external event to validate your divine worth. You've already been gifted with the most powerful, creative force, your own imagination, and it is already at work. The only question is, are you using it consciously, or letting it run on default? To awaken spiritually is not to find something new. It is to remember what you are. God does not dwell in a separate place. God lives within your thoughts, your inner images, and the emotional states you nurture. These are not random impulses. They are the brushstrokes of creation. Once you truly grasp this, you stop living reactively. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You become the sculptor of your life, using imagination as your chisel, awareness as your canvas, and faith as your guiding hand. You were taught that power exists outside of you, that transformation, salvation, or divine favor must be earned or discovered in people, places, rituals, or sacred objects. But if imagination is the creative power of God, and all signs point to that truth, then the true temple was never constructed by human hands. It was established within you. The presence you were conditioned to worship as distant or beyond reach has never been absent. It is the quiet intelligence thinking through your mind, feeling through your heart, dreaming through every image and emotional state you carry. And yet, for most, this inner creator has been ignored, not because it is hiding, but because it is too close to notice. It is the very source of your awareness. And so, like the eye that cannot see itself, it is often overlooked. Everything in your life begins in the invisible realm of thought and belief. The moment you accept something as true, whether consciously or unconsciously, your imagination begins weaving circumstances to support that truth. This is not magic. It is not luck. It is law, spiritual law, operating with precision. Your imagination doesn't seek approval from others. It doesn't rely on consensus or recognition. It only requires one thing, your awareness and intention. Without it, you live passively, responding to life as if it's happening to you. But with it, you begin to live consciously, realizing that life happens through you. This is not poetic metaphor. It is the spiritual architecture of reality. Your life bends around the beliefs you embody, not just the ones you talk about, but the deep-seated assumptions that make up your self-concept. Most people long for change, while clinging to the mental and emotional patterns that produce repetition. They pray for breakthrough while cultivating thoughts that guarantee stagnation. But you cannot plant seeds of limitation and expect to harvest liberation. You cannot rehearse narratives of fear and expect peace to bloom. Imagination doesn't respond to surface desires. It responds to your dominant assumptions, the ones you rehearse in silence and carry in your emotional state. It reflects the story you believe to be true, whether that story empowers or diminishes you. So now you must stop and reflect. What have I been imagining? What story am I living out in the privacy of my mind? Because that story is not idle. It is becoming flesh. It is shaping your relationships, your health, your finances, your opportunities, all from the inside out. The world is not merely happening to you. It is happening through you, shaped by your inner state, until you return to the source, your own imagination, the forgotten divine faculty. You will live as a servant to unconscious assumptions. You will react instead of create. You will hope instead of realize. But once you remember, truly remember, everything changes. You stop waiting for miracles and start generating them. You no longer beg for change. You command it, not with arrogance, but with spiritual clarity, because your role is not to endlessly seek or worship the Creator as something apart. Your true purpose is to awaken to the truth that you are a channel for it, not in theory, but in function, not as a symbolic idea, but as a daily, lived reality. You are not separate from the creative force. You are its instrument. You are its expression. You are it, in motion, in consciousness, in form. Once you truly remember that your imagination is the creative power within, a new kind of awareness begins to unfold, not just insight, but spiritual responsibility. Life no longer appears random. It no longer seems to be governed by luck, fate, or external forces. Instead, you begin to recognize a deeper pattern. Every belief you've held about yourself, about others, and about the nature of reality has quietly sculpted the conditions of your life. You see clearly now that the external world functions as a mirror, not a reflection of effort or words alone, but of your internal state of being. And this mirror is uncannily accurate. It doesn't reflect your hopes, your surface-level affirmations, or your verbal declarations. It reflects what you truly accept as real. It responds not to delay, but to immediacy, not to someday, but to now. This is where many people encounter resistance. They want change, but are reluctant to let go of the identity they've built around struggle, limitation, or past wounds. They attempt to modify their circumstances without transforming the self that is generating those circumstances. But a mirror cannot show you a new reflection until you change your posture, until you shift your inner position. Your assumption, the reflection remains the same. Assumption is the movement of consciousness. It is not passive wishing. It is the deliberate acceptance of a new internal state as already true, not as a distant goal, but as a present fact. And the moment you persist in that state, your imagination, which is the God within, begins organizing reality around that assumption. The effects may not always be immediate, but the process has already begun. Imagination is not fickle. It doesn't guess. It responds faithfully, even when you're unaware of the seed you've sown. Every state you assume, even for a moment, sends out a signal. That state magnetizes people, conditions, and outcomes aligned with its energetic pattern. This isn't positive thinking. It isn't superstition. It is spiritual law, the law by which reality takes shape around you. The world does not bend to what you wish were true. It bends to what you live as true, and what you live is defined by what you've accepted within yourself as real. So the key question is no longer, what do I want? The more accurate and spiritually potent question, what am I assuming right now? Because assumption is a form of prayer, not in words, but in being. It is prophecy, not in prediction, but in embodiment. You do not beg the mirror to reflect a new image. You assume a new identity, and the mirror follows. The mirror, your world, has no creative will of its own. It reflects the dominant vibration of your inner state. Even the problems you face are shaped by the narrative you've assigned to them. If you view a challenge as confirmation of your failure, it grows heavier. If you view it as part of your growth, it becomes lighter. In either case, it is your assumption that defines its meaning and outcome. Nothing escapes the law of assumption. Nothing escapes the creative power of imagination. Whether you're aware of it or not, you are using it at all times. This mirror, The reflective nature of reality is always in your hands. Use it unconsciously, and you may see chaos, contradiction, or confusion. Use it deliberately, and it becomes a tool of spiritual mastery. So don't wait for external permission. Don't delay for signs. Begin now to observe the inner story you tell yourself daily. Speak from the state you desire, not to convince the world, but to reaffirm it to yourself. Think from the version of you that already lives in fulfillment, not as wishful fantasy, but as the inner structure of your reality. When you do this consistently, the mirror must respond. It cannot resist the vibration you sustain. It has no authority to override the consciousness that commands it. It reflects what is given, no more, no less. If your imagination is the divine faculty, the God within, then your assumptions are the mechanism of creation itself. So dare to assume, with clarity, with persistence, and with spiritual confidence, and watch as the world no longer recognizes the version of you that once waited for change. It will begin to mirror back the version of you who has already become. If assumption is the seed of reality, then desire is the soil in which it must be planted. Hunger is not a flaw in your spiritual design. It is a signal, a divine impulse rising from within, not to torment or weaken you, but to guide you toward greater expression and realization. Desire has long been misunderstood. Many are taught that wanting more is selfish or unspiritual, but in truth, desire is evidence of what your imagination, the creative power within you already knows is possible. Every authentic longing you feel is a whisper from your higher self, a nudge from the God within, saying, "This can be yours." But desire without direction can easily become suffering. When you don't understand the role imagination plays, you interpret your hunger as a sign of lack instead of guidance. You focus on absence. You dwell on what's missing. And in doing so, you unknowingly reinforce the very condition you wish to escape. The solution is not to suppress desire but to elevate it into assumption. When you begin to live from the state of already having, when you walk in the internal assumption that what you desire is already yours, everything starts to shift. Your hunger becomes fuel, not pain. It sharpens your clarity. It anchors your focus. It sets life itself in motion. This is where what sacred texts refer to as the bridge of incidents begins to form. This bridge is not linear. It rarely follows logic or predictable paths, but it is always precise. Imagination doesn't need to know how the middle will unfold. It simply defines the end, and the rest begins to arrange itself. People, events, opportunities, all begin to align with your accepted reality. But here is where many falter. They abandon the process too soon. They plant the seed of assumption, then dig it up with doubt. They affirm a new reality, but then contradict it with fear. Imagination doesn't respond to fleeting thoughts. It responds to consistency. It obeys faith. It is not activated by intensity but by persistence. The bridge might not look the way you expect. At first, it may even appear chaotic or irrelevant, but do not mistake movement for failure. What you're witnessing is not disorder, it's reorganization. The outer world is responding to your inner command. So stay loyal to the vision. Speak from the result, not about the desire. Think from the end, not toward it. Feel it is real now, not later. You are not waiting on life. Life is already responding to you. The only true delay is the time it takes you to believe fully. The longer you hover in indecision, the longer it takes for the bridge to complete. Imagination is not waiting for signs. It is the source of signs. What you declare within becomes the signal that reality obeys. So stop questioning the legitimacy of your desires. Start answering them with action, with assumption, with certainty. Desire becomes sacred when it leads you inward, when it calls you to remember that what you seek is already encoded within you. The future you long for isn't outside your reach. It is alive within your consciousness, waiting for you to embody it. The bridge to it is built by imagination alone. Every step you take in belief is not a guess. It is an act of spiritual creation. It is faith in motion. And the God that builds this bridge isn't above the clouds. It is not a being to be begged. It is the imagination within you, responding to your clarity, your assumptions, and your trust. Once you understand that your imagination constructs the very bridge of your life, a deeper and more sobering truth emerges. With that creative power comes sacred responsibility. You are never not imagining. You are never not creating. Every passing thought, every silent assumption, every unexamined feeling, these are not meaningless. They are commands sent into the unseen, and those commands must return, shaped and formed by the invisible laws that govern creation. Whether you are aware of it or not, your imagination is always at work. It is continually orchestrating conditions, influencing encounters, and laying down the path ahead with absolute precision. But this is not a message meant to burden you. On the contrary, it is meant to liberate you, to recognize that imagination is God, is to realize that you are never truly at the mercy of the world. You are not a victim of chance or fate. You are, at the most fundamental level, the author of your experience, not in blame, but in authorship, not in shame, but in sovereignty. The stories you silently repeat, the roles you accept without question, the identities you refuse to release, all of them gain momentum through repetition. And imagination, being divine, does not argue with your choices. It does not interfere or override. It simply accepts and amplifies. If you imagine limitation, it becomes real. If you imagine expansion, that too becomes real. The sacredness lies in your power to choose. And yet, most people surrender this responsibility. They prefer to live under the authority of fear, habit, and doubt rather than stand inside their own divine creative center. They treat imagination as a fleeting mental activity, a tool for fantasy or idle daydreams, rather than what it truly is, a living, responsive spiritual force. But the moment you stop and truly see, when you grasp with clarity that every mental image is a seed, that every feeling is a direction, and that every assumption is a foundation, your relationship with life transforms. You no longer speak without intention. You no longer allow fear to take residence in your heart without challenge. You become deliberate, not out of pressure, but out of reverence. You act, think, and feel with awareness, not because you must control everything, but because you honor the sacred power within you. You are not here to micromanage outcomes. You are here to guide the current of your consciousness, and by doing so, shape the unfolding of your experience. That is your power. That is your responsibility. That is your offering to the divine. To honor your imagination is to honor God. To ignore it is to deny your purpose. You were not created to drift through life. You were made to direct, to form, to speak into the silence, and to watch as reality answers. And once you truly embrace this role, once you embody this truth, you stop asking, "Why isn't it happening?" You begin to ask the far more powerful question, "What am I creating now?" In conclusion, you were never without power. You were simply unaware of its source, the force you've been seeking outside yourself, the answers you've been waiting for, the guidance you've prayed for. All of it has been with you all along, hidden in plain sight as your own imagination. Imagination has always been God in disguise, not a poetic metaphor, but a living truth. It has quietly waited for you to notice it, to feel it, to believe in it, not as a theory, but as your reality. You are the dreamer, and the moment you awaken, the dream transforms. So, use it. Use this power boldly, with faith, with deliberate intent, or remain in a life of limitation, not because life denies you, but because you never claimed the throne within. This is the great secret. Your imagination is God. It is your tool, your compass, your gift. Use it or drift. Shape life or be shaped by unconscious thought. Create or repeat. But now that you know, there are no more excuses. Only the question that matters. What will you create next?